Welcome to our weekly compilation. Lean back, get comfortable, and brace yourself for an expedition through life's most enigmatic corners. Get ready to be awestruck and charmed by the unexpected twists that define our journey. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more intriguing content coming your way. Folks who have dated very attractive people that weren't that smart, what was the final straw? Story 1. I had a beautiful girlfriend once that a lot of people would think is dumb. Every time she said something ridiculous, I would just agree with her and carry it further as if we were both just joking in the same way. She would laugh and always had a great smile with big, beautiful eyes. Whenever she got mad at me for something, I would just look at her and say, I didn't say that to make you upset. Why would I do that on purpose? I'm always on your side. And she'd believe me. In fact, it's the truth, but so many people just can't get past the little peeves and annoyances. For her, it was as simple as explaining that her boyfriend was always on her side. For my part, whenever I started to get upset with her, I'd always internally compare what I was upset about not having her or what I was upset about to not having her. And she'd always win. In the end, she said she wanted to be free. No reason given. As her friend, I'd always considered love as something you give, not get. So, where I could have held her on, I just let her go. You can't own people anyway, and I was only ever her friend. It's been years, and I'm still the only person she's ever had a long-term relationship with, and she's still the only person I've ever loved that much. Well, yeah, I think you make some decent points there at the end that you can't own people. And yeah, if someone says they don't want to be with you, you kind of got to respect that and just go with it. It doesn't necessarily have to do with even doing everything right or wrong. Sometimes there's just not a compatibility, and it's good if you can respect that. And I hope that you're both able to find love elsewhere as time goes on. Story 2. Such a gorgeous man, but so dumb about health. After we had finished having intercourse one session, he asked me why I liked him to wear condoms. I explained I didn't like that he wore them, told him I preferred intercourse without a condom, but was worried about pregnancy and STIs, and he was like, I never knew that. Immediately went to go get tested after that, and had him tested as well. Had to make sure to give him a lesson about the dangers of unprotected intercourse before I broke up with him. I missed his body and his raw animal dumbness sometimes, but I think I made the right choice. He's actually the reason I want to be an intercourse health educator now. Oh, and by the way, he hadn't caught anything. It was just dumb luck that he never did. Must be really weird to have the talk with someone you're dating, presumably around your own age. To be fair, I don't know if I would call this necessarily dumb about health, or just par for the course, depending on which state he was raised in with the way some of the things are going. And I don't think this is political at all to say that intercourse education should be a thing. It should be taught. And oh my gosh, with the way things are going, we're going to have more gorgeous, dumb guys out there not knowing what condoms are for, I guess. Story 3. There was no real final straw. It was more the fact that I couldn't possibly stand to be around her anymore. She was balls to the wall hot. Like, step over your own grandmother hot, although she could barely hold a conversation and once confused a bunch of 7-year-olds playing hockey on the professional rink for the actual game we were watching when in line for beer at intermission. When she talked, I either couldn't really understand what she was saying because it made almost no sense, or it was just the most childish joke ever. My youngest cousin had way sharper wit, but my God, she was hot. Hands down, the worst decision I ever made. Story 4. This girl was definitely out of my league, looks-wise, but she was proud of being stupid, petty about everything, and annoying. But whatever, I was in my early 20s, and for whatever reason, he liked me, so I went with it. Things seemed to be going fine when one day she asked me why I always drink so much. I thought about it and realized that I literally drank every day I saw her and never drank on the days I knew I wouldn't. I couldn't stand being around this girl unless I was drunk. Decided intercourse wasn't worth that kind of lifestyle and broke it off the next time I saw her. Wanted to actually be sober before I did it. Story 5. He was a model, but pretty dumb. I was getting ready for law school, but very inexperienced when it came to dating. We had a lovely time for a while, our intimate chemistry was great, but he eventually ghosted me. A year later, we chatted online to catch up, and he admitted to me that he felt that he wasn't good enough for me, and that's why he stopped talking to me. With more dating experience, I now know that we wouldn't have worked as a couple anyway. I realize now that dating someone of similar intelligence is more important than dating someone with superior looks. But dang, he sure was cute, and had a fantastic dong. So this is the part where I'm just going to say that saying that people are dumb for not knowing, certain textbook academic kind of things is silly. There are many different types of intelligence, and I have met people who are incredibly book smart and do not have any sort of social intelligence or common sense, stuff like that. Everyone's got their own areas that they're going to accelerate in, and judging people just on academics is silly. You can have a perfectly great relationship between someone who's academically smart and someone who's just socially smart. But at the same time, it is nice to have connecting points. You want to have intersections there, and sometimes if things are too far off, it's just not going to work, and that's fine. Yeah, I'm not going to ramble on anymore. I hope you get what I'm saying. Story 6. He was a total hottie, with wealthy parents who took us on a nice vacation one time and were super sweet people. The intercourse was great. My first O was hard, which is a big deal for a college-age girl just getting past the initial awkward teenage fumbling phase. But he was stuck in the grade school mindset that being dumb was cool. I said something along the lines of making a C on my first calculus exam, and he bragged about failing an entire college pre-algebra class. I just kind of ghosted him after that. Story 7. Gorgeous blonde, but really, really dumb. We met at work, and my friend was her friend's brother, so we started talking a bit. She knew her boyfriend was cheating on her, and so she cheated on him with me. I felt kind of bad, but her boyfriend was such an abusive D-bag. Then they broke up, and we started going out. And then a few months later, she dumped me to run away to North Dakota with him. I wasn't really mad. They were both crappy people and deserved each other. She deserves North Dakota. Story 8. Being bored and having to fill up time with intercourse is only good for so long. Then it just becomes hollow, which sounds good, but unfortunately starts to grate. And just general embarrassment when I took her out with my friends and wanting to stab myself in the face when out with hers. My nice, attractive ex really liked to accidentally spoil surprises for people. It was super embarrassing whenever she did it. Story 9. Beautiful gal she was, and amazing in bed, but a lot of the things that came out of her mouth just astounded me. I managed to put up with it for a while simply because the intercourse was incredibly enjoyable, but at a certain point you take a step back and really think about the situation. The physical side may be fun, but not being able to connect with someone mentally in the long run is a grating thing. Oh, and the conversation of her believing that dinosaurs still existed, they were just hiding in the forests. That really did it for me. All right, so here, we do have a thing saying that not being able to connect with someone mentally in the long run is grating. And yeah, like I said, you need to have, an intersection of interests and, certain compatibilities. But it's totally okay to have separations there too. Everyone's different. Every relationship is different. And so I've never thought of just discounting someone because they were, so much more intelligent than me or less intelligent. How would you even measure that? I don't know. And I mean, maybe dinosaurs are hiding in the forest. Prove her wrong. Story 10. I'm actually marrying him in 13 days. I don't think he's dumb. He's very good looking though, but some of the things that he says come off as dumb. One, he said something as I was saying it, and when I told him I was just thinking the exact same thing, he said, "I have tilapia." After a few minutes of having him repeat what he just said, he finally said, "I can read your mind." He meant telepathy. 2, he thinks the curb on the streets are called curves. 3, he thinks raccoons are called ratcoons. 4, he says the bottom line is, there are so many things, but I love them. He makes me laugh. Story 11. She was gorgeous and a few years older than me. The next day of texting, she texted me wanting to go out dancing. I replied, "Okay, but just to let you know, I'm not that good. I have 2 left feet." She stopped replying to me. I thought to myself, no, she didn't actually think. So I replied about 3 hours later saying, "Just so you know, I don't actually have 2 left feet. It's an expression." Her immediate reply back was, "Oh, thank God." It was at that point I knew I couldn't ever. Story 12. He lived in his parents' basement at 21 and would frequently tell them they weren't allowed down there because it's his. The laundry room was down there. What broke the straw was the time he had trouble getting an erection, and instead of saying he was frustrated, he shook around like he was having a seizure and screamed, "All I see is black." Sounds like he frequents 4chan. Parents, what is something your child has done that you can never forgive them for? Hey folks, quick warning. A number of these stories today are going to include talking about S assault and R, self-termination, and abuse. And so if you are sensitive to those topics, you may want to skip this one. Story 1. Friend of a friend. I met the guy in passing a few times, and he was a major butthole and a horrible person. Lazy as all F. This guy hated working. All he wanted to do was watch sports, drink, and eat. He worked only when he absolutely had to, lied to everyone about what he did. "Yeah, I work for Dell, IBM, big bank, huge corp in their effort department," and was one of those know-it-all bastards who jump into any conversation and make it about them. He would start some job, work for a bit, then quit because it was not challenging enough, or they don't pay me enough for my knowledge. Sounds like he was a smart butt 20-something. He was a 50-year-old man-child. He started doing drugs, then lost job after job because he quickly got to the point where he couldn't stay clean for more than a week. I know he was fired from one job for showing up still drunk from the night before, and another because he was found passed out in the bathroom after shooting up something. Started to sell drugs to try to make money, got involved with a LTR with a prostitute, stole money from his mother. Father died when he was a kid. She was in her 80s, disabled, and not all mentally there. Drove to Oklahoma or Louisiana to gamble at the casinos, lived in her house, tried to get her to change her will so he could get everything, and made her sign a fake handwritten version, abused her, tried to sell the house in some shady mortgage deal, and get power of attorney over her. She wasn't really in a mental or physical state to do much other than sit in her chair and cry all day. It didn't help that the hooker girlfriend would sometime bring Johns to the house when he was there and when he wasn't. The rest of the family tried to do everything they could to get rid of him, and his sister was finally able to get power of attorney over her only a week or two before she died. Even though they got her into a nursing home, she declined quickly. Afterwards, he wasn't supposed to get the house, but he refused to leave. He basically started to hoard crap inside and barricade himself in while the family was trying to get him to leave. The police wouldn't get involved, don't know why. Less than 6 months after his mother died, he was killed or died of a heart attack or something. Remember the prostitute girlfriend? Yeah, she and her 21-year-old son showed up one day and beat him to death. I don't remember if anyone knew what was said, but it was loud with yelling and screaming to the point neighbors called the police. The son and his mother got in their car and drove off before the cops got there. They walked in, found his body, and since they knew who he was, called his sister and aunts to let them know. No charges, no investigation worth a damn, just another druggy dead as far as they were concerned. After the rest of the family came in to clean up and sell the house, they found drugs stashed in closets and under trash, and anything of value of the mother's gone. Family heirlooms like jewelry and furniture weren't where they had been for 50-plus years. No one knew if he had sold it all before or if the girlfriend stole it when they killed him. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty unforgivable. I'm sure that this person has some trauma in his past, abuse or who knows what, things that weren't handled right that let him down that way, but whatever sympathies I might have had for this person were gone halfway through that story and in the amount of things he was doing to other people. Once you're starting to hurt other people in your life like that, you have to take accountability for what you've done. And it sucks that his story played out like that, but I feel a lot worse for everyone else he affected than I do for him. Story 2. My stepson came into my life when he was 12. He had a younger brother that was 6 at the time, also my stepson. Younger brother was relatively normal, but the older stepson was having a lot of trouble in school and got in trouble all the time. Older stepson is in counseling because of his behavior. He's cutting himself in school, there's a self-termination attempt. I'm devoting lots of time to trying to help him, trying to fix his life. He's incredibly intelligent and thoughtful. In the middle of this all, we find he has tens of thousands of pictures of CP on his computer. Edit. Only looked at a small sampling, but it was the prepubescent kind. We deleted them, consulted a lawyer, bring it up in counseling, lock the computer down, install monitoring software. Stepson figures out how to get around everything and is clearly addicted to CP. He's 15, nearly 16. He brings home this 14-year-old girl's underwear. I take them away. Edit. His therapy program specifically forbade this. See comments for details. He comes at me with a knife. Police are called, but he's smart and knows how to work them. We found a treatment program to deal with CP addiction. Go to counseling once a week and group counseling once a week. Part of this program is admitting your wrongs. You have to come out and admit it in front of the group. He drops a bombshell. He's been molesting his younger brother since he was 6 or 7, and he forcibly R'd his now ex-girlfriend. The DA won't press charges because there's no proof, so we have to do this all voluntarily. We have to ask the state to please take him and give him services. If we don't, the state will take his younger brother and place him in protective care. It's a pretty traumatic process. He's removed from the home and placed in a day treatment program by social services, but only after several awkward months. In the meantime, his younger brother is having issues. He throws tantrums all the time and has to be restrained at home. We learn how to restrain our kid to prevent him from hurting himself. Treatment does not go well. He hates the program, hates the restrictions on his life. He's much smarter than the other kids in the program, so he becomes sort of a ringleader. He's labeled high risk and a potential psychopath. Eventually, he's about to turn 18 and the state is going to end their custody over him since he's a voluntary case. He has to figure out what to do or he'll be homeless as he can't come back to living with us. He asks if we could just kick his younger brother out of the home and make him go live in estate care so he can come live at home. I forgave him for most of it, but I'll never be able to forgive him for that moment when he was absolutely remorseless, where he asked if he could just take the place of his victims because the path he had chosen made his life harder. He knew very well what he was asking. He was never sorry for his actions. To anyone going through anything as just horrible and awful as this, I really don't know that you can hold yourself responsible too much. I know that parenting and stuff has some effect, but there are some people where there might be, actual problems within the brain that nurturing cannot beat the nature of it. And it sounds like you tried to do everything in your power for this person, and I'm glad that you at least tried. But I hope anyone who's gone through something like this, maybe you did make some mistakes along the way, but I think everyone's going to. This is a terrible situation. It's just, it makes you feel gross to even think about. And I don't know what I would do in that situation. If I had kids and that was something I was dealing with, I would be devastated and confused and, so yeah, I just want to say I don't want to blame the parents in this situation. It sounds miserable. Story 3. Don't have kids yet, but I can share something that I did that my parents have never forgiven me for. I won't even use a throwaway. I got my parents in trouble with the police and child services when I was 7. About 20 years ago, give or take, I was in the 4th grade living in a medium-sized town in New Jersey. I'm a first-generation Chinese American. Both my parents are from Hong Kong and moved to the States in their teens. I was a super hyper kid. Both my parents worked in New York City and came home late. They didn't have the time to take me to Pee Wee soccer or Pop Warner football. So I was always the disruptive kid in class, as school was my only real outlet for socialization. To all the kids who grew up with their parents throwing around a football or a baseball, Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas presents, yeah, I wished I had parents like yours. Anyway, my parents are both very traditional immigrant Chinese people, so when I was bad, my parents used to discipline me. I didn't know any difference at the time. My father used to use this bamboo stick or the handle of a feather duster to do it. I just thought that everyone went through the same thing. Well, one day at school, a teacher got wind of it. I don't remember how exactly. Maybe they saw a bruise, maybe I mentioned something, maybe I wanted the attention. It's all a fuzzy blur, but very quickly words went from my teacher to nurse, from nurse to principal, from principal onward. You get the point. It got ugly fast. Phone calls were made, and that night detectives were at my house. My parents knew something was up because they started getting phone calls. When my mom got home from work, I remember she said, "Hey, Wap," instead of my normal name of Wapoon. She'd never called me that in my life. I knew I effed up. It was bad. Very bad. I tried explaining that my dad never hit me because he was angry or in rage, but it was just the way he did things. I guess that lessened what punishment would have come their way. Eventually, things started to clear out. We were lucky, I guess. We had to go through family counseling. My parents never forgave me for that. From that till now, I've been treated as a second-class citizen till the time I left the house and went to college. I would get the one-ply toilet paper while everyone else got the two-ply, so to speak. I had a kid sister whom they babied and gave the world to and celebrated. Growing up, I felt more like a financial liability to my parents rather than their flesh and blood. I became an angry teenager who listened to a lot of Rage Against the Machine and Papa Roach at the time. I cringe at Papa Roach as I type this. I can empathize with both sides, though. To my parents, I was their pride and joy who inexplicably and suddenly became for them this source of terrible shame and remorse. I guess for a proud traditional Chinese man, I hurt him very much in a world where Chinese men are taught to be bulletproof emotionally. On the other hand, I think, dude, this is America. This isn't the same place as where you came from. For many years, I have been trying to repair my relationship with my parents. Maybe they effed up, maybe I effed up a little too. It taught me that the world isn't perfect and maybe that's okay. I have some serious fears, though, about me being a crappy dad as a result of all these things. I hope not. For what it's worth, though, I think I am stronger for it. I don't harbor any ill feelings anymore, despite how awful it must have been for all of us through those years. I hope that one day they will forgive me because I know I have forgiven them. I know it's another culture, and so I don't want to be too critical of that. But at the same time, if your parents, as you say, really did, distance themselves from you and hang on to bitterness because of basically you as a kid, just talking about what you were experiencing and them getting in trouble for hitting you and stuff, which they shouldn't be doing. Even if it's okay in their culture, it's still not a good thing. And if they're holding that against you all this time, even up as an adult, they need to get over that. A parent you can't hold grudges against your kid for something like that. That's not okay. So, yeah, folks, if you're dealing with this is not a you problem. This is a them problem. Parents, have you ever thought your child was dating someone who was too good for them? What happened in the end between them? Story 1. My parents have been married for almost 30 years, and when they were engaged, my dad's parents separately on 2 occasions straight up asked my mom if they were sure she wanted to marry him. Being 22 at the time, she thought it was because they didn't like her. It was not that at all. I love my dad, but he has some mental learning and emotional maturity issues that mean that even though he is going to be 54, he functions as a 15 to 18-year-old kid. That wasn't so obvious back then when he was 25 to 30, but it is now. My grandfather and my mother used to commiserate about how they were married to the same person. My grandmother is just as bad as my dad. My grandmother is wildly unaware of her own issues, but recognizes my dad's problems and was trying to subtly warn my mother off. On my mom's side of the family, my uncle married a woman who's lucky to stay with him because he has a severely paranoid personality. Also, my grandmother is getting married to a longtime friend in April, and he could do so much better than her. They are happy, but we already decided we are keeping him and getting rid of her if need be. I mean, the big thing to remember with a lot of this stuff is sometimes, the people in the relationship who you're going to and going oh, are you sure you want to be with this other person? That person might see something in that other person that you don't, or they may find something in that person that balances really well with their own personality. That's not saying that all of these work out great and that people are always wrong, but people don't necessarily have the same perspective and understanding that you do. So I'll just say this at the top of the video, folks. If someone's trying to warn you off of a relationship because they're just like, he just doesn't seem like he fits with you, you might know better. Story 2. Well, my brother's girlfriend is definitely too good for him, or was, and this has been discussed by my mother and I, and she agrees. So what's become of it is my brother was once a felonious piece of crap that refused to hold a job despite myself or my mom hooking him up with the job in the first place. He sold nose candy in a local bar every night, got crap-faced and geeked up in said bar, and would frequently get in fights, usually at that bar. Since he had been dating this girl, he had quit smoking cigarettes over a year now, maybe longer. He has also been sober for a year and a half. He doesn't do nose candy anymore either, but still sells it to a couple close buddies. He has a job and also does his own thing repairing and refurbishing game consoles, so it does have a happy ending in this case. They are very happy together, and I guess technically he is still a felon, and some things will never change about him, but he's better at hiding his piece of crap tendencies and has really grown as a person. Well, I'm glad to hear that this story has a happy ending. It sounds happy enough to me, to each their own. I hope that they're happy and that he's at least not a piece of crap to his partner. Story 3. In 1991, I was 17 and working for the local carnival at the time during the summers for fun, under-the-table cash, and giving girls free rides on the Scrambler. One cute girl invited me on a date, and her father met me at the door with a gun and said that his daughter had a headache and couldn't come out. Joke's on her, though. I turned out to be really nice, a good family man, and a generally successful businessman. The carnival boss fired me at the end of the second summer because he said, "You don't fit in here. You should be running a business like this, not working for one. Go do better for yourself." I look back on that day and wish I could go back 23 years and tell that boss thanks. He was old at the time and probably dead now, but he was a good boss. Thank God for him. Story 4. My younger stepsister's ex-boyfriend was definitely too good for her. Not that she set the bar very high for that. He was a sweet guy. He wanted to settle down and be with her forever. They bought a house together. They adopted dogs together. He's lucky they didn't end up having kids together. I don't know all the details as I'm hearing them all secondhand from my mom, but evidently my sister ran off with another guy during a manic episode. She left him with a mortgage he can't pay on his own and will probably end up in foreclosure. Apparently there's also been some domestic violence in the last few months. And to top things off, she's recently bought a gun. Jason, if you're reading this, be safe and stay away from her. You're better off. Story 5. My sister had that too good of a boyfriend for 5 years. Every time I could, I would tell him to run away from that crazy girl as fast and as far as he could. But he didn't listen. My parents probably felt the same way because that dude was awesome as F. She was so mean and condescending to him, it was unbearable to watch. He didn't need that crap. He was better than that. And when she finally dumped him for no reason, he got drunk and almost killed himself driving his car, losing his license. He's now struggling to work without a car, but he's freed. Now she's crazier than ever, psychosis and crap, but he's finally freed. Freed, but not healed. Okay, and this is where maybe you should listen to other people when they're just like, "Oh, no, you're too good for this person." Because if there are things about the other person like, hey, this other person is condescending to you and treats you really, really inappropriately, that is something that you should maybe take to heart and kind of process a little bit, because you might not be realizing that. When you're in a relationship, you tend to block some of that stuff out, but it does build up inside of you and can be kind of bad. So I'm not saying that people telling you that someone else is abusive are always right, but I am saying that you shouldn't outright dismiss them in that instance. Story 6. My dad has liked very few of my boyfriends over the last 20 years. I remember one he particularly liked. I had been living with him for about a year. When he fell in love with someone else, he gave me my 30-day notice. I was devastated and called my dad asking if I could move home. My dad's response? How did you F this one up, Rockstar81? The one I actually liked was, my grandma will hardly speak to me after breaking up with the nice Jewish boy. She really liked him. Last time we visited, she asked about him. Thankfully, he and I are still friends, so I can give her updates. She still talks about how I should have held on for dear life instead of walking away over something as silly as religion because, after all, you can fake faith. Story 7. So I met my significant other while they lived in England. For a month leading up to their first flight over here, their mother would serve breakfast each morning, then lovingly and silently said a news article about someone getting AR'd or murdered in America next to the plate. After being over here for 2 weeks, we're talking to Mom over Skype and she smiles at me and proceeds to read off a list of every single address I've ever had since I turned 18. Fast forward to where we've been living together for 3 years. We get into a fight and my significant other calls Mom and says something to the effect of, sometimes I get so mad I could just walk out. The next day, Mom calls back and says, I bought the plane tickets you asked for. You can leave for home in 3 weeks. Mom spends the next 3 weeks convincing my significant other that they're a terrible person for wanting to waste all that money, and Rianne is a horrible pile of crap, and now you have to go back. Everyone's so looking forward to seeing you again. And now we've been together for 7 years. Okay, I've heard horror stories about moms/mother-in-laws being a little too much, but oh my word, just what an unpleasant thing to do to you. I know that it's coming from a place of love from this mother, but that's just so disrespectful and kind of gross. She needs to get over that stuff. I hope now that you've been together 7 years, I hope she's starting to get better. And if not, I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to have to communicate with that person again, because that's just mean. Story 8. My last relationship wasn't good enough for their son. I'm from a big family, working class background, and despite holding multiple degrees and having an excellent job with a prestigious company, his parents thought I wasn't well bred enough. They never even met me, but had decided because I had 5 siblings, was from a suburban town in another state, and my parents never graduated high school, I just wasn't good enough. I had lived overseas, am well-traveled, conservative/vintage dress sense, etc., etc. I even changed the way I spoke long before I met him when I first moved to my current city because my accent sounded bogan/chavs/trailer trash. Nope, I still wasn't good enough for their precious little snowflake who still lives at home. And it didn't help that I wasn't Jewish. We broke up because his dad started a fight with him about the fact that he wasn't mature enough for a serious relationship. He was 27 at the time. Story 9. I was on the other end of this, dating a guy whose mother thought I was too good for him. I lived with them for a time, and some days she would look at me all concerned and ask me what I was doing with her son. At the time, my favorite argument to all the people telling me things like that was, I want him, so that makes him the best option for me. She was right, and I did leave him eventually. I still see his parents sometimes, though. They were lovely people. I'd have been homeless for much longer in my younger years if not for them. My current significant other's mom hated me when we first started dating, so I was the bad partner too. She said I came with too much baggage and refused to acknowledge my existence for months. We've been together 8 years now, and she and I have grown close. Now I can't get her to stop talking. Teachers, have you ever seen a student come back after a break, for example, spring break, Christmas break, completely different? What were they like? Hey everyone, quick content warning for this video. We are going to be discussing self-termination and trauma in quite a few of these stories, and so if you're sensitive to those topics, just be prepared to hear about them, or you may even want to skip this video, whatever you're comfortable with. Story 1. My mom works for the U.S. Department of Labor and is contracted to work for a program that allows high school dropouts, juvenile delinquents, and just down-on-their-luck kids the opportunity to earn their choice of a high school diploma or GED. They also graduate from the program with a trade and a guaranteed job. Since the age range at her particular facility has been getting younger and younger, it's especially stressful. Most of her students are 16 years old. Do you remember that student in class who always had to disrupt class, disrespect the teacher, and generally just do stupid crap? She has a classroom full of them. She has the 100-yard stare every day when she gets home from work. Everything is provided for the students: uniforms, meals, snacks, school supplies, dorms, and they even receive a small check every other week. If you've ever watched Late Night Cable or Dr. Phil, you've probably heard this place mentioned. They have facilities all over the country. It's basically one step down from juvie, and most kids don't really have a choice to be there. And then a few months ago, there was a boy placed in her care who we will call Jay. Sad, sad situation. Understandably, he was heartbroken. Great kid, but he totally withdrew, threw all his effort out the window, and darkness became his only personality trait. Every day when greeting him to her class, my mom would say, "Hello, Jay, how are you doing this morning?" Or, "Nice to see you this morning, Jay." And his response would always, "Can I just go crawl in a hole and die?" He asked her to buy him a bottle of black nail polish, to which she obliged because she had a soft spot for him. After a week or two, she realized it wasn't just a typical goth phase he was going through. She sent in multiple referrals to the psychiatrist on center, and he was given meds and sent home on a 2-week break. It turns out the only reason he was at this facility was because his mother remarried and his stepfather kicked him out. He had nowhere to go. When he returned from his break recently, my mom said that when he came back through the door, he looked like a different person. He was smiling ear to ear. She asked him if he had a good time off, and he responded, "I finally got to see my mama." It sounds like your mom is doing some really amazing work and trying to help out a lot of these kids. And I'm glad that places like this do exist, because sometimes you hear of kids who end up in juvie and this and that, and they're not given any real good chance. It can affect and ruin the rest of their life sometimes. And to know that there are places like this trying to do their best to help those kids out gives me a little bit of hope. So that's good to hear. Story 2. Not a teacher here, but I've seen this happen to someone who was my friend for 15 years. One Christmas, that's all it took for him to go into a downward spiral and F up his life. He invited his girlfriend over for one Christmas dinner, and she got into an argument with his parents. At the end of winter break, they've broken up, he got a haircut, he had hair like Kurt Cobain, became an alcoholic, and now he knows every cop in the city because they all gave him a fine or locked him up for one night. And that all happened in under 2 months. And I've thought that my life was a crap show. The three of us used to be classmates in elementary. When I went to the elementary meetup about a month ago, I was effing shocked that he didn't come since he was a popular guy. I talked a little bit to my ex-classmates, and they all told me that his ex was a fine, nice person and that there was nothing wrong with her. It was all him. That breakup really effed him up. We all agreed that his life went down to crap, and he had plans to go to the university. He had everything he could wish for: tons of money, a big room, an attic to store all of his stuff in. He lived in a big family house with a huge garden and a pool, and now he got kicked out by his parents. He lives in a crappy one-bedroom apartment with his fiancée, works 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and gets drunk a lot, and he's just 19. I think that there is still some chance for this guy to get fixed. There absolutely is still a chance for this person to get fixed. And for any of you who feel like you've maybe had a downward spiral, you've screwed things up, your life is in shambles or whatever, most of the time, you can fix that. You can work on it. It's not always easy, but you can. I screwed up my life in some pretty big ways when I was younger. And it took a while for me to get through that crap. I've lived paycheck to paycheck or worse for over a decade. And I had to work pretty hard to get through that. But you know what? I did eventually, slowly but surely. And my life is amazing now. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm so happy. I have an amazing partner. I have 2 beautiful puppies. It's worth it. So, yeah, I know I'm not commenting on the story aside from that last line, but yeah, there's always a chance that things can get fixed. So, go for it. Story 3. Not a teacher, but in my 8th grade year, a girl had a brain aneurysm over Christmas break. Thankfully, she survived. Was out of school for close to a year. I think she came back before Christmas break freshman year, but I'm not sure. She was a lot different. Her hair was just starting to grow back, she walked with a limp, and her speech was still a bit slow because she had to relearn everything. I remember they had a water jug in the front office where you could donate money for her parents, And it felt like once a month or so they'd have Purple for Bella days where we'd be asked to wear her favorite color to show our support. I remember buying a purple shirt and stealing my parents' spare change just to help out any way I could. Graduation was very emotional because she was still in the hospital, so they had her little sister accept her degree in her place. We had purple balloons. We were just kids. It was a small school, she was very popular, and few of us had seen anything like this. I remember when a kid who was set to graduate high school died in a horrific car crash when we were all in 6th grade. I know he had a cousin or two in middle school. I remember coming to school the next day to join my class in a group hug because our homeroom teacher was overwhelmed during morning announcements when they announced his death. She'd been very close to him. They dedicated a tree to him in the high school. We're just like that. Story 4. I'm not a teacher, but a rather good friend of mine, Kay, took a sabbatical from school for a year. It was meant to be a family vacation for a couple months and a few more months of rediscovering life for himself, his little sister, and the parents. The family vacation went horribly wrong. His kid sister died of pneumonia, and the parents couldn't keep the marriage together after that. The divorce was fairly amiable, but there was a lot of trauma for Kay, which he just couldn't deal with. He came back to school a year later as planned, but a completely different kid. Where he used to be boisterous and a ball of reckless energy, he was quiet, subdued, and even seemed scared. I don't know if it was pure luck, but the school kids were kind to him, and 3 years later, going back to college, he was almost healed. We're out of college now and still really close friends. He doesn't talk about those years of his life. I can't imagine how hard it is to lose a sibling like that, and for, the parents, marriage falling apart because of that. That's a kind of tragedy that I think a lot of families can't weather, understandably so, as sad as that is to say. But I am glad that, it sounds like, friends, you stayed there with him, helped him through, and things are doing better for him now. You never forget losses like that, but life can still be good. And I'm pretty sure that, his sister would have wanted him to have a good life either way, so, yeah. Story 5. Yes, unfortunately. Star student, wonderful to be around, very funny. After break, she's sullen, dresses differently, makes new friends, avoids adults, been in and out of trouble, and skipping class to get high or smoke cigarettes in the parking lot. When I finally had a chance to get to talk with her, she told me in not so many words she had been AR'd at a party pretty severely. I couldn't do much given I only had her for 1 semester, and I wished there was more I could do or offer to chat with her about her problems. But it's pretty clear she wanted to avoid those problems for a while. It's not healthy in the long run, but constantly being asked by adults to talk about it isn't either. I give her guitar lessons for free after school every now and then just to help her get her mind off of things. Story 6. Not a teacher, but a friend of mine left around Thanksgiving break to get brain surgery to get a tumor removed. He returned months later and didn't recognize anyone, couldn't remember a lot of things, and acted manlier than before. I befriended him again, and when we were talking about boys, he looked at me weird when I expected him to say something, which I just thought he didn't find the guy attractive. He then said, "All right, well, see you later. I have to go pick up my girlfriend." I forgot to mention, months before the break, he came out to me and a few of his friends as gay. I was so confused and never told him he had come out to us before. Edit, he is openly gay now after high school ended, so it's all good. When did the attention seeker go too far? Viewer edition. Story 1. My former roommate and former friend, literally everything she did and said was for attention. Like, it was unbelievable. I didn't realize this until I moved in with her, but I slowly started realizing that she lives for attention. She had a St. Bernard, sweetest dog you'll ever meet. Up until I lived there, you wouldn't think that dog was the center of her universe. You would think that dog was the center of her universe, but once you're there, you realize she didn't give a crap about that dog. Never walked him, bathed him, played with him, took him for walks, or even talked to him really. Nothing. He just sat around in the hall, laying on the floor, hoping for a scrap of attention, so I would always stop and rub his belly and my foot and give him pets. I realized she only got that dog because St. Bernards will immediately draw attention. And draw attention he did. She would use any opportunity to post her face on social media somewhere, like in random Facebook comments that have nothing to do with it. One time I posted a picture of my new driver's license with the veteran designation on it, so in the comments, she posted her own driver's license saying, "I get discounts too. I'm not military, I'm just cute," and then proceeded to make her own post about it saying the exact same thing. Mind you, she wasn't exactly a looker. She wasn't really attractive in any of the conventional ways that someone would be attractive. But despite this, and because of all her Facebook friends enabling her attention seeking, she was in love with herself. She once cosplayed as Selena Quintanilla and posted a picture of herself next to Selena saying she looked like her, and I laughed. But for her hat trick, she bought a effing house, using whatever government assistance she could find, all so she could have that sappy dramatic story about how she drove to Arizona with nothing but her clothes and her car and lived in a shelter and look how far she's come and blah, blah, blah. She made a video with sad music and the whole nine. Now, the reason I say she bought this house for attention is because she couldn't afford to pay for it. She absolutely had to have at least one roommate in order to make ends meet. So when she deliberately started being crappy to my dog, causing me to immediately move out with little notice, she scrambled to find another roommate. So she moved a complete stranger into her home where her autistic son lived, all because she can't afford it alone. To recap, this woman got a dog and a house, all for attention, fully knowing that she wasn't prepared for the responsibility of either one. And oh, did she milk it like a cow when the dog died. This dog she didn't give two craps about, and once left outside in 37-degree weather while she went to her room and had awkward intercourse with her boyfriend and didn't come back to check on him for 3 hours. I let the dog in after 20 minutes when I realized he was out there. But this girl didn't bother for hours. She's the worst kind of person, and everyone who knows her thinks she is the best kind of person, except for one friend I had who always saw her for what she was. Thank God for that friend, LOL. I thought I was crazy. I've got to say, I feel like some of the core of the problem where getting people like this is social media. I feel like when we're on social media, it should be, especially for Facebook and stuff, it's to stay connected with friends and family and to share little moments of your life. But it's become this competition for likes, or not even competition, like the site. It just gets you addicted to that kind of stuff. And for some people, more and more of this stuff just becomes for show. I'm not immune to this. I've certainly posted stuff just to get likes and for show and everything. And yeah, I feel like social media just kind of does that to us. So not excusing this woman's behavior and everything, just think I might see where it is coming from. Story 2. Sorry in advance for this novel. I didn't know her well, glad I didn't, to be honest, but in elementary and middle school, there was a girl in my grade named Paulina. Short, reasonably pretty, developed early, popular. I saw her parents once at a parents' night, and they seemed very rich and very cold. It kind of made sense why she acted out on occasion and was usually a bit more cozy than an 8th grader should have been with the boys in our grade. 2 specific instances of her come to mind. 1. In 6th grade, about age 11 to 12 for those not in the U.S., my family went on a small vacation to a city in the next state over that had a location of a nationwide theme park chain. Rhymes with pricks brags. While there, I got my first pentagram necklace. My older sister had been reading about paganism, and I had rejected the mainstream church years prior. I wore that thing constantly, and no one really cared, till we started talking about the Salem witch trials in class. The attention I got was so uncomfortable, but she went one step further one day, running up to me in the hallway and showing me a pentagram ring she had gotten, saying, "We can be witches and cast spells together." It was so transparent and so cringe. 2. At the time, our town went to the next town over for high school. At the end of 8th grade, so we're about 14 to 15 at this point, we were all bussed over there for a tour and kind of pre-orientation. Our grade was broken into groups, about 20 per, and led around by a senior there. I think the ROTC program took charge since more than one of the guides were in uniform. Paulina was in my group. Most of us are just taking in the tour, basic questions and whatnot. I think our guide half joked about how students weren't allowed to eat lunch in the courtyard anymore since people were caught smoking weed there a few times. Paulina proceeds to ask if anyone's ever been caught in the closet effing. It was so awkward, and I don't even remember what the guide's response was. No one laughed or really acknowledged it. At another point in the tour, the guide was talking about different electives, extracurriculars, etc. that were open to us. I think this was over 15 years ago. And she proceeds to chime in with, "My hobby is effing." I forget if this was before or after the previous one mentioned, pretty sure it was after. Again, awkward silence and no recognition. Thankfully, she didn't go for the third time's the charm approach. I have no idea what really became of her since a lot of kids from my middle school went on to different high schools than I did. Some moved, some were sent to private schools. There are a lot of private schools around here. From what I heard, she ended up at a local Catholic school that a lot of kids in my grade did, including one of my best friends. That sucked. Rumor has it, she was caught doing the nasty on more than one occasion in closets with guys and girls. If that's what she wanted, that's her choice, but maybe not on school grounds, especially a Catholic school. I hope she's okay and has sought some level of therapy. She's still a person, after all. Hey, I appreciate that you wish this person well and hope that they've gotten some therapy and stuff because, yeah, sometimes people are acting out, and especially in those younger years where you're figuring yourself out, I can understand it a little bit more, but it is something that can take some effort to kind of work out of, so, hopefully she's okay, and hopefully any of you who've struggled with stuff are okay too. Story 3. I had a friend who was so narcissistic she convinced herself that her half-baked opinions were hard facts, and her bald-faced lies were irrefutable truth. Let's call her Molly. She was the epitome of an overgrown middle school mean girl who never threw out the adolescent bully mindset. When I met her, she was in her 40s, had 2 kids, and was on her way to being a grandmother. Molly craved attention in every way possible. She just could not stand anyone else being in charge, being in the spotlight, or getting praise for something they worked hard for. If she wasn't getting the attention, she would do anything she could to usurp that moment or ruin it. The whole "if I can't have it, no one will" attitude. I learned very quickly in order to tell her something in confidence because it would never stay between us. In addition to lying about being abused by her stepmother as a child, that her older brother had violated her, she also claimed she had cancer, that her boyfriend after her first marriage disintegrated had abused her, then kicked her out when she was states away from family with nowhere to go. She also claimed that her second husband was abusing her but wouldn't leave him because she had nowhere to go. I later found out it was all a lie, every single word. She got a rush out of sharing things that were none of her business to spread around and being what I refer to as a grief Nazi. If she couldn't gossip about something real, she would make things up. She spread an entirely untrue rumor that I caught an STI from a one-night stand, outed me to my extremely conservative, homophobic Italian Roman Catholic father, and when I admonished her for that, I went low contact, she flipped her lid. When my father died from cancer, she got so mad that I wasn't talking to her anymore. She was pouting because I wasn't talking to her anymore and had the nerve to say, but didn't think I'd find out about it, well, they never got along anyway. She called me up and not so subtly tried to snoop around to see if I had heard what she had said. I had. She tried to make excuses for it, and I told her she was damn lucky she was, at that point, living several states away because I would have driven over and beaten her butt in front of her husband. That terrified her. We're not friends anymore. Man, why didn't you want to go on a second date? Viewer edition. But also seriously, women and non-binaries too. Get in here. Story 1. In my 20s, I went to the church equivalent of religious classes that didn't count as college. At the time, I couldn't afford college and wasn't about to get loans since I didn't have any scholarships, so I needed something to do with my life, and these classes helped keep me busy and social on the days I didn't work. Anyway, at this building, there was a game room where we could choose to play either ping pong or pool. Not being particularly good, but enjoying knocking the ball around on occasion, about once a week instead of playing volleyball in the gym with my friends, I would play pool by myself in the game room. One day this guy comes in and decides to take a fancy for me because I was always the one he saw in the building playing pool. So we got to talking, and I agreed to go on a date with him, a decision I would later come to regret. We decided to go bowling. So after classes on a Wednesday, we head over to the bowling alley in my town since women get to bowl for 2 games free that night weekly. While waiting in line to get our shoes so he could pay for himself, one of my sisters comes in with several of her friends and starts talking to the guy and me. All is well, I think. We decide the 5 of us will join up as one big group, and the guy surprisingly decides to pay for all of us to play a 3rd game. Fine with me, since 2 games normally go by fast, and 2 people switching off doesn't give much time on a date for a couple to get to know each other, so adding people would give me a chance to get to know him better. Later, I would come to realize that it was the worst decision ever because the guy ended up being overly competitive. And when one of my sister's friends ended up having dumb luck and being good at bowling that night, he practically left me in the dust as he focused on trying to one-up the friend. That wasn't even the worst part. After we finished bowling, I had to drive him home because he didn't have a car or a license. I sat in silence, simply focusing on the directions he gave to his house while he told me how compatible he thought we were because he needed a woman to keep him in check and I had the personality to do just that. I had already decided while I was being ignored during bowling that I would never go on another date with him ever again. As a result, I quit going into the game room anytime he was present and made sure that I was around my group of friends so he couldn't talk to me. For months, he kept texting me to set up a second date, but I would always kindly turn him down until finally I thought he stopped. Relieved, I went months without hearing from him, until a random day he sent me another text, flatly asking if I was ever going to go on another date with him. At that point, I kindly said that we weren't compatible and that due to my new work schedule, I didn't have time for dates at that period. Never heard from him since. Oh, and my sister decided to be a sister and did in fact tell my dad about me being on a date the night of bowling. He asked about it the next week and brought up how my sister said I looked like I didn't enjoy it. Told the story to my dad, explained some of the off-putting things after he tried to explain I should give him another chance and not just go bowling, and once he listened to what all my reasons for no more dates were, he said he was on my side. Yeah, I've got to admit, I'm 100% there with you. Just I need a woman who can, keep me in line. Like, oh, no, you want to date someone. You don't want to be, in charge of them and their trainer. If you wanted to do that, go and, adopt a dog. It'll probably be a much better relationship. Yeah, I mean, guys, if you think that that's a compliment to someone, I guess it kind of is, but I don't think it's it's maybe a compliment to them, but probably doesn't make you look the best. Story 2. I went on a date with a girl I met online. We clicked pretty well online, but in person she seemed very nervous, and I ended up having to lead the conversation for the most part. No big deal, but I personally prefer equal participation in conversation. Afterward, I wanted to take some time because I honestly wasn't sure how I felt. It had been my first date ever. I had a really bad phone with barely any battery at the time, so I left it home before going out on a run/grocery run. I got home a couple hours later and had the following messages on my phone. A little bit after I had left, I had a really fun time. I hope there's a second date. 30 minutes later. Or is there not going to be a second date? 2 missed calls. Final message 30 minutes after the last one. If you're rejecting me, at least tell me why. Needless to say, I was freaked out and got really stressed about the whole situation. Again, very first date. I called her up and ended things with her as nicely as I could. Edit, just to add, I mainly ended things because I realized I had things to work on for myself because that date made me realize I wasn't ready for the dating world just yet. Although I will add that the stress was increased because before the date she had mentioned showing my picture to her parents. It just felt like things were moving a bit faster than I was prepared for, having no dating experience at that time. It is an anxiety I am trying to work on. Yeah, I know everyone works at different speeds, Some people date a lot faster and harder than others, but showing parents the picture of someone before you've even gone on the first date, I guess that's not terrible. I could see someone being excited and be like, oh, I've got a date tonight. And they're like, who? And it's like, oh, this person from this site. Let me show you a picture of them or something. I don't know. But that's a lot. And then all the texts and stuff. Like, I miss the days before cell phones when I could just go out and people knew they couldn't get a hold of me. Like if they called my house and I didn't answer, oh, he's out. No big deal. Now we got cell phones and you can never, ever be out. How dare you not reply? Ugh, I hate it. Story 3. I'm gay. Met this guy on Tinder. Very nice, educated, polite, nice looking, and the whole 9 yards. Seriously, he checked all the boxes that made me interested and wrote to him in the first place. A level of comfort had been established, so we exchanged numbers. It was like the switch flipped. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I figured you can't really ascribe intent to a text message. The whole read between the lines thing, we eventually met for drinks. Turns out he's a huge pothead. I have nothing against smoking the occasional joint, but when they come in reeking of weed and funky underarms, that's a no-go for me. I decided to be a sport and at least stay for appetizers. Mind you, I wanted this to work. At the very least, I figured I might have a new friend. This guy was argumentative to the point where he turned everything I said into a debate. I'm not expecting everyone to share the same opinions or viewpoints as me, as agreeing to disagree can lead to scintillating conversation. However, this guy, he seemed to be hell-bent on getting the last word and just speaking to hear the sound of his own voice. As someone who has studied psychology, it became clear to me that the guy had severe control issues and was possibly even a narcissist. Fortunately, I didn't live in the area that he did, and I had to drive close to an hour to meet him. I purposely let the texting go quiet just to see if he would reach out and initiate conversation. He didn't. Bullet dodged. Story 4. Not a dude nor a date, but when I was 16, a family friend 3 years older than me introduced me to his old friend from high school. Let's call him Jeffrey. Normally, I would have been okay with getting to meet people this way, except for the fact that he gave Jeffrey all my info. My phone number, my address, all my socials, work profiles, etc. So he started harassing me with texts and calls saying, if we don't go out, I'm going to kill myself, and driving by my house 3 times a day on his truck. At 16, I was scared for my life. After 37 no's, I finally said, if we all hang out at X place together, will you leave me alone? And Jeffrey finally said yes. Horrible idea. We did a group date hangout with 3 other couples, including the family friend who introduced us, at our local mini-golf place. I would have enjoyed this, but the entire time Jeff tried to kiss me, put his arm around me, buddy deodorant is your friend, and hold my hips. I had to push him off me the entire time. The second part of the hangout, we went to the movies at the mall to go see Jack and Jill. Yep, this was 2011. And at last, I could plan my escape. As we sat down, Jeffrey was eating all his food and candy, offering me handfuls covered in saliva and dirt. I went to the bathroom to call my dad to come pick me up at the mall food court. So I texted my family friend to tell him my grandpa was in the hospital. She really was, though, so it wasn't a complete lie. And I had to go see her immediately. After that, I blocked and deleted everyone's numbers, socials, etc., and never spoke to those friends or that awful Jeffrey dude again. Last I checked his Facebook and over time unknowingly befriended an ex-girlfriend of his. He still lives at home, mama still babies him, he mooches money off his older, more successful brother, and he's a registered S offender. Yeesh. Bullet dodged. You did indeed dodge a bullet. And may I also say, I know you did your 37 no's, kept refusing, and then finally said, look, if we just do this with other people around, will you leave me alone? I have in the past once been pestered by someone to go on a date, and I kept saying no, I wasn't interested. And then finally, after many, many attempts, I relented, and that is always a mistake. If you have been saying no to this person that many times, and when you're saying yes, if you're like, I'll just say yes to get him off my back, or maybe it won't be so bad, really think about that. I'm not saying it's definitely a bad idea, but I'm saying you should probably trust your instincts. Oh, by the way, that date, the person that I went out with, like, gave me a note like 2 days later about how she was in love with me and we were going to have kids and stuff. We were in high school. I did not take it well. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.